Why do you work? At first glance, this question might seem trivial. We've all heard the joke, and many of us relate to it deeply. Perhaps the only thing that can drive an adult to leave their warm bed on cold mornings, Monday through Friday, is poverty itself. Working for money, that's the plain truth. But have you considered that this money-only mindset might have led us into a dead end? It's left us exhausting ourselves on an endless treadmill, constantly on the defensive, never able to find true joy in our work. I can hear you saying, "Oh, please, not another lecture about work is about self-improvement, right?" But you'd be wrong. Our discussion today goes far beyond typical workplace motivational content. Why Do You Work? Is a book that challenges our conventional wisdom, delving into human nature, the essence of capitalism, and the most widely applied theories in sociology. Whether you're an employer or an employee, once you understand the fundamental question of why we work, you'll know how to make the work you offer others more appealing, and how to find more fulfillment in the work others assign to you. The author, Barry Schwartz, is a psychology professor at Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania. He has long studied social behavior and psychology and is considered one of the most influential Western psychologists. He has published 10 books and hundreds of academic papers. His previous work, The Paradox of Choice, was named one of the top 10 business books by Businessweek and Forbes magazines. This new book, Why Do You Work?, has earned high praise from technology entrepreneurs, university professors, Google's senior VP of People Operations, and best-selling business authors. So what will this book tell us? Why do most people around you find work monotonous, meaningless, and life-draining, rarely experiencing job satisfaction? Why do modern companies dislike employees who work with a sense of mission? Why do rigid corporate incentive mechanisms actually decrease employee motivation? Only by understanding the deeper reasons behind work can we design better work environments, find better ways to motivate teams, and help ourselves find meaning in our work, truly securing a good job. How work became hateful. Are you satisfied with your work? If you are, you're in the minority. Gallup, the world's largest survey and consulting firm, has been studying global workplace engagement since the 1990s. After more than 20 years of surveying 25 million employees across 189 countries, their overall findings are stark. Only 13% of employees are actively engaged and enthusiastic about driving their company forward. 63% are not particularly engaged, just going through the motions, and the remaining 24% are actively disengaged, harboring nothing but contempt for their work. But are there people who are truly satisfied with their work? Perhaps among that top 13%. They treat their work as a calling, approaching it like a crossword puzzle, challenging yet confident in their ability to solve it, growing through the challenge, and ultimately achieving extraordinary satisfaction. Most of us hate work because we don't have that kind of job. The majority of our work is rigid and mechanical, offering little room for creativity, sometimes even pushing against our psychological and moral boundaries. So our hatred of work is completely legitimate and justified. It's the nature of work itself that needs examination. This aligns perfectly with Professor Schwartz's viewpoint. So let's trace back to the root. When did work become so detestable? Shouldn't everyone find creative joy in their work? Our search leads us to Adam Smith, the founding father of economics who famously described the invisible hand of market economics. In his masterwork, The Wealth of Nations, he wrote, "If a person were to receive the same compensation for doing difficult work as for doing nothing, they would perform carelessly, as laziness and comfort-seeking are human nature." Based on this view of human nature, Adam Smith advocated breaking down work processes into simple, repetitive steps with little inherent meaning. He described the production process in a pin factory. One person draws out the wire, another straightens it, another cuts it, another sharpens the point, and another grinds the top. 10 workers could produce 48,000 pins in a day, while a single person handling the entire process couldn't make even 20. Each person repeating the same task endlessly, like Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times, is undoubtedly monotonous, but efficiency soared. Someone asked Adam Smith at the time, "Who would want to do such simple, repetitive work in your factory day after day?" Smith replied, "People certainly don't enjoy the work there, but they wouldn't enjoy working anywhere else either." The implication was clear. Human nature is inherently lazy, and the type or content of work is irrelevant, people are universally reluctant to work. If there's one thing that could get them on the assembly line, it's wages. Actually, Adam Smith's understanding of human nature wasn't quite so simplistic. He explored more complex ideas in his other book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. However, many later theorists and practitioners weren't interested in that nuance, instead amplifying his "humans are lazy, rewards are paramount" perspective. 2 centuries later, we can see that Adam Smith's design has permeated all industries under the market economy system. Whether in industrial production or education and cultural sectors, all have begun to segment processes, quantify work, and regularly assess input and output. Now everyone trudges to work with heavy steps because, aside from material compensation, there's no other reason to go to work. All of this began with Adam Smith's simple assumption about human nature and human motivation. Working with purpose, but employers usually don't allow it. What's wrong with this assumption? We argue that assuming human nature is lazy and only rewards matter isn't the best choice for either employees or businesses. Let's first look at its impact on employees. Researchers conducted interviews with workers across various industries. Let's take Luke, a hospital janitor, as an example. One day, a patient's father angrily confronted Luke, claiming he hadn't cleaned his son's room, though Luke had already done so while the father was away. Luke began to argue, but suddenly seemed to realize something and immediately said, "I'm sorry, I'll clean the room." Why did Luke stop arguing? He later told the interviewer that he suddenly understood the father's position. His son had been in the hospital for 6 months, and he was stressed and anxious. Realizing this, Luke's anger dissipated, and he cleaned the room again in front of the father. Consider Luke's colleague, another janitor, who was mopping the hospital lobby when he noticed a patient doing recovery exercises on the stairs after major surgery. He immediately stopped working, concerned that the freshly mopped floor might be too slippery. Yet another colleague would change the artwork in patient rooms weekly, dance for patients, and play comedy shows to cheer them up. Let's use these hospital janitors as examples to analyze what employees want from their work and how typical management views such behavior. First, we know that the hospital's standardized job requirements for janitors are straightforward. Clean rooms and indoor equipment, clean toilets and drains, wash dirty clothes, make beds, change light bulbs, mop hallways and stairs. Notably absent from these requirements is any mention of caring for or comforting patients and their families or making them feel better. Yet Luke and his colleagues genuinely rejoice when patients improve, encourage patients and their families, and try to distract them from their pain and fear. When patients and families need to talk, they listen and comfort them. These janitors didn't rigidly stick to their job descriptions and ignore everything else. Instead, they spontaneously redefined their work responsibilities, internalizing the hospital's mission of saving lives and alleviating suffering into their understanding of their work. What's the reasoning behind this? Is it simply that working in a hospital naturally elevates one's moral character? It's not that simple. Researchers have surveyed workers across many industries, particularly those generally considered repetitive, with little room for creativity or personal achievement: factory workers, maintenance staff, hairdressers, and so on. They found that in all these fields, some people could find meaning in their work beyond simply working for pay. This suggests that people tend to assign meaning to their work. When people view their work as meaningful or even as a mission, they go beyond the scope of their job requirements. Work ceases to be just a means of making a living and becomes a source of achievement, honor, and purpose. However, this all depends on how much freedom the work itself allows for developing such noble qualities. If the hospital management were followers of Adam Smith's philosophy, they would certainly consider Luke's work efficiency too low. If he only executed his job duties, he could clean more rooms in the same time. Moreover, such employees are harder to control because they perform work beyond their responsibilities, making it difficult for management to effectively supervise them. Any reasonable person knows that employees like Luke are assets to the hospital. However, for the sake of efficiency in management, supervisors often suppress such non-conforming individuals in their organizations. As Professor Schwartz says, "You can no longer get excellent employees" isn't quite right. Rather, you can only fail to get excellent employees when you offer work that is both boring and monotonous. This is the dilemma facing many of our passionate and hardworking employees today. Do material incentives work? Having discussed employees, let's examine how Adam Smith's assumptions misguide businesses. Modern corporate management centers on compensation management, rewarding employees who meet certain standards with increased pay and punishing those who don't with reduced compensation. Of course, following Smith's assumption that employees only care about money, both rewards and punishments revolve around financial compensation. Adam Smith's exact words were, "The only way to make employees work hard, perform excellently, and maintain correct work principles is to pay high compensation for their outstanding performance." From a business perspective, this sounds reasonable. Even if we don't agree it's the only method, we might still consider it a good one. However, this seemingly logical reasoning is actually incorrect. Material incentives not only fail to strengthen people's motivation to work well, but can actually weaken it. Economist Bruno Frey calls this phenomenon motivation crowding out. Why does this happen? Let's look at some examples. A daycare center in the United States had many parents who would arrive late to pick up their children, causing the center to delay closing time repeatedly. Finally, the center implemented a policy. Anyone who was late would be fined. The results surprised the center. There were more late parents than before. Why? Simply put, the parents began treating the fine as a price. What's a fine? It's a punishment for breaking rules. And what's a price? It's payment for goods or services. The daycare center intended to penalize late behavior, but parents interpreted the fine as a service fee for extended childcare hours. Before the fine, parents felt that being late was wrong. After the fine was implemented, the moral constraint on lateness disappeared, replaced by straightforward economic calculation. They would consider whether the fine amount was worth it, and if so, they would be late without guilt. In this case, the economic motivation didn't strengthen moral motivation, it weakened it. Here's another experiment. Researchers asked people on the street if they would help move a couch into a van. Some were offered payment, others weren't. With or without payment, respondents had two different thought processes. Without payment, people understood helping as a social behavior, helping others, and most were willing. With payment, it became an economic transaction, requiring evaluation of whether the compensation was worth their time and effort. If respondents judged the payment insufficient, they wouldn't help. In this case, most people offered payment actually refused to help. Social motivation and economic motivation were again mutually weakening. Therefore, incentive mechanisms can become dangerous for businesses. Our companies should use them cautiously. Rather than fixing people to assembly lines and designing complex reward and punishment conditions, companies would do better to design themselves to give employees more autonomy, variety, skill development, and growth opportunities, allowing employees to develop a sense of honor and achievement through their work. No incentive mechanism can replace the intrinsic motivation of doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. How wrong ideas change reality. Self-fulfilling prophecies. Earlier, we mentioned that all this workplace dissatisfaction stems from Adam Smith's simple assumption about human nature. Through our examples, we've shown that this assumption might not be the best path to improving our lives. But why haven't entrepreneurs and employees discovered this over centuries, instead maintaining unwavering faith in it? This is a characteristic of social theory. Natural science laws remain unchanged regardless of how humans discover and summarize them. The universe doesn't alter its operations. But social theories are different. Once an idea is invented, whether correct or incorrect, it profoundly influences people's behavior, making them act according to the theory's logic, thereby making the theory increasingly entrenched. Sociologists call this phenomenon a self-fulfilling prophecy. Consider this classic education experiment. Researchers randomly designated some students in elementary school classrooms and told teachers these students were intellectually gifted and likely to achieve great academic success. Of course, this was fabricated, but because the experts had spoken, teachers unconsciously changed how they treated these students. By the end of the term, these students indeed performed exceptionally well. Let's replace the old Chinese scorpion and frog story with a modern business example. There was a belief that temporary workers wouldn't be loyal to unions because they'd accept any wage, making them potential strikebreakers. During a major strike, precisely because temporary workers weren't union members, they became the natural choice to fill factory labor shortages. Superficially, the prophecy that temporary workers aren't suited for unions was fulfilled, but careful analysis reveals that the power of the belief itself created the cause and effect relationship, making the prophecy come true. This clearly demonstrates how beliefs influence behavior. Even an incorrect theory can become true if people believe in it. Adam Smith understood this principle. Look at his original words. Those who spend their lives in a few simple operations have no opportunity to exercise their intelligence. Since their work is extremely simple, with no difficulties to overcome, they naturally lose the habit of developing their intelligence, and over time they become as stupid and ignorant as human beings can possibly become. Isn't this describing a self-fulfilling prophecy? Returning to our theme, can you say human nature is solely comfort-seeking and motivated only by monetary rewards rather than spiritual fulfillment? No. Human nature is an invention, not a discovery. Adam Smith invented this particular view of human nature. Human nature needs redefinition. Fortunately, many companies have already recognized this issue, including Toyota and Google. Management scholar Jeffrey Pfeffer has long studied how companies can sustain profit growth. He discovered that creating a good company and creating good work are essentially the same thing. Those efficient companies share these characteristics. Provide comprehensive job security. Allow team self-management, decentralized decision-making, give employees high autonomy. Offer above-industry standard compensation, but don't rely on individual incentives. All employees share in company profits. Maintain comprehensive training systems. Evaluate employee performance, but don't overassess. Integrate company goals and vision into every practice. If you're a boss, strive to build your company this way. If you're an employee, work to join such a company. Summary. We first identified the root cause of why work has become so detestable, the theoretical assumption of human laziness and reward supremacy, proposed by Adam Smith, the father of economics. This assumption led humanity into assembly line production, making work repetitive, mechanical, and rigid, reducing each person's sense of meaning to its lowest point. We then discussed why Adam Smith's assumption was misleading from both employee and business perspectives. First, for employees, it suppressed enthusiasm and creativity, confining people within spreadsheet calculations. Second, for businesses, management methods became one-dimensional, limited to compensation-based rewards and punishments. However, according to recent sociological research, this only weakens employees' desire to work well. We then traced how Adam Smith's assumption became deeply ingrained through the sociological phenomenon of self-fulfilling prophecies, making us blind to its flaws. Fortunately, many companies have recognized this issue and are making changes. Let's redefine human nature, redesign work, and transform ourselves into better employees and better leaders. The Industrial Revolution lifted humanity from poverty, vastly improving people's material lives, one of civilization's greatest achievements. But while the Industrial Revolution alleviated material poverty, it came at the cost of spiritual poverty. The author tells us that while such a trade-off might have been necessary in the early stages of economic development, continuing to sacrifice spiritual fulfillment for material gain today is no longer justifiable. Each of us must strive to create a human nature worth pursuing. In conclusion, the question, "Why do you work?" leads us to examine not just our jobs, but the very nature of human motivation and fulfillment. The answer isn't simply for money. It's about finding meaning, purpose, and genuine satisfaction in what we do. By understanding this deeper truth about work, we can create better workplaces, become better workers, and ultimately lead more fulfilled lives. Key takeaways. Work dissatisfaction stems from outdated assumptions about human nature. Intrinsic motivation often proves more powerful than material incentives. Companies succeeding long-term create environments fostering autonomy and growth. The future of work requires balancing material rewards with spiritual fulfillment. Both employers and employees benefit from redefining work as meaningful activity. Change begins with challenging and updating our assumptions about human nature.